Last Sunday night, Shira and I were in a place we had never been before, doing a thing we had never done before, and I'm just so glad we did. We were in Lakewood, New Jersey. Ir HaKodesh, the holy city of Lakewood, New Jersey, for a wedding. Now, Lakewood is the undisputed singular capital of the charedi ultra-Orthodox world in North America. Lakewood is the home of a yeshiva, Beth Medrash Govoha, which is a charedi yeshiva, and it is the second largest yeshiva in the world, second only to Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And we were there for something we had never been at before, which is a charedi wedding. Now, at a charedi wedding, the men and women sit separately, and at a charedi wedding, the men and women dance separately, and at a charedi wedding, there is a very big wall that separates the dancing, and at a charedi wedding, a strong majority of the men were wearing black hats. And being in Lakewood for a charedi wedding made me, in this very weird, sick way, think of a very famous, evocative story that I first read 21 years ago, and I've remembered it ever since. It's about the late, great Dr. Paul Farmer, in the biography by Tracy Kidder called Mountains After Mountains, Mountains Beyond Mountains. And as you may know, Paul Farmer, may he rest in peace, used to go to third world countries, very impoverished, where the citizens of those countries did not have access to modern health care. And his life work was to go with a team and to deliver modern health care to poor areas where they otherwise would not have it. And there was an outbreak of tuberculosis in Haiti. And so Paul Farmer and his team go to Haiti to treat this outbreak of tuberculosis. And they find a curious pocket of resistance to their medicine, which is, as Tracy Kidder relates the story, they find that many of the locals in Haiti who are afflicted with tuberculosis think that the way they got tuberculosis in the first place was that an enemy of theirs cast a curse upon them, and that the response to having tuberculosis is to get a voodoo priest to cast a retaliatory curse upon your enemy. And so Paul Farmer's holy work was to help the citizens of Haiti realize that tuberculosis is a disease that's caused by germs and that antibiotics are the most effective cure. So he's able to persuade a woman from Haiti to take the antibiotics. And after she does, she feels better. She enjoys a refuah shalema. And afterwards, she says to him, Dr. Farmer, I know that tuberculosis is a disease and it's caused by germs. And I know that the antibiotics you gave me helped heal me. And I also believe that I have an enemy who cursed me. And that's why I got the tuberculosis. And so I've asked my friend, the voodoo priest, to cast a curse on my enemy. Paul Farmer says to her, well, if you think that the tuberculosis you got because of an enemy's curse, why then did you take the antibiotics? And the Haitian woman says, honey, are you incapable of complexity? It's a long story for a short punchline, but honey, are you incapable of complexity, in its context, was a rhetorical question. She was saying to Paul Farmer, look, I got layers. I understand about medicine and germs and antibiotics. I got it. And I also feel a connection to a truth system that's not modern and that's not medical, that's about curses and voodoo religion, and that also claims me. And since I contain multitudes, I can do both. Why can't you, Paul Farmer, get that? Well, that story is 21 years old, 2003, 21 years old. And I think about it, though, now as extremely urgent because, honey, are you incapable of complexity? Today is not a rhetorical question. It's a very real question. Think about the Rosh Hashanah dinner table they're going to be sitting down to in a few weeks. Think about who's going to be around that table, children and grandchildren who are going to be around that table. Think about friends and family who are going to be around that table. And think about the very many different views on the complex issues in this contentious age. Honey, are you incapable of complexity? How do we process all that complexity? And I learned something so powerful and so beautiful from this wedding in Lakewood, New Jersey. So the bride is Shandi. Shandi is the 10th of 13 children in this charedi family. The procession included all 13 children and all of their spouses and all of their grandchildren. It was beautiful. It was loving. It was not brief. And Shandi married such an interesting groom. His name is Joshua Leifer, and he is the author of the book Tablet Shattered, who is coming to Temple Emmanuel on Wednesday night, September the 18th. This is the guy who wrote a book about Israel, and in Brooklyn, he was banned by the bookstore for being a Zionist. So I called him that night and said, would you come to Temple Emmanuel? And he's coming to Temple Emmanuel this Wednesday night. And Joshua Leifer embodies so much complexity. He grows up in the conservative movement in Wyckoff, New Jersey, in a shul like this in Wyckoff, New Jersey. He goes to the Solomon Schechter Day School in New Jersey. Love of Israel, love of Zion, love of Zionism is in his mother's milk. He goes to Israel a ton of times as a kid with his family, with his schools, with his camps. He goes before and after college. He lives in Israel for a long time. He learns to speak Hebrew totally fluently. He meets Shandi in Israel on what was supposed to be his last day of that trip in Israel. They fall in love. They spend more time in Israel, and they're going back to Israel shortly after his speech here this week to spend their first year of married life in Israel. So you can imagine somebody choosing, imagine your kid, imagine your grandchild, choosing to move to Israel for a year just now. That's love of Israel. And Joshua Leifer is a relentless critic of Israel. He's a relentless critic of what he calls the occupation of the West Bank. He is a relentless critic of the governments of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's a relentless critic of the war, claiming that it lacked a coherent strategy, and that resulted in unnecessary death and loss of life on both sides. In his book, he tells the story of how he, as a college kid, got involved in If Not Now, which is very critical of Israel. And he writes about how he was trying to write his senior thesis at Princeton, and he kept getting delayed because he found himself always writing thought pieces for If Not Now. And he talks about protesting Israel, its occupation policies, and he got arrested and spent a night in jail for his protests. So, step back. Here's a guy who loves Israel, met his wife, in Israel, going to Israel now for a full year in the midst of all this gloom and doom and war and anxiety, and highly critical of Israel. How does all that work? So here's what I learned at the wedding in Lakewood. I learned how to do complexity when complexity is hard to do. And the secret sauce for how to do complexity when complexity is hard to do is the power of love. Josh Leifer is able to live in Israel and love Israel and be critical of the Israeli government because his heart is loving enough to encompass all that. The charedis, and by the way, this is not Satmar charedi, so these are charedis who love and support Israel, are able to dance with if not now activists and progressive activists at the same wedding because they all share a love of Josh and Shandy. And to be entirely honest with you, I felt the power of love cutting through complexity myself. If you had ever said to me, would you be in dialogue with an if not now activist? I would have said, no way, never. If you had said to me, would you ever invite an if not now activist to Temple Emmanuel? I would say, no, not ever. But for one thing, love. Josh Leifer's mother, Lori Muffson, and my wife, Shira, were college roommates in 1980, and they had been best friends for the last 44 years. And we love the Leifer family. We were at Josh Leifer's bar mitzvah. We were at Josh Leifer's wedding last week. Love cuts through complexity. But love does more than that. And here, this is just so important. Don't miss this. It's not only that love cuts through complexity. Love is deepened by complexity. Love is made stronger by working our way through complexity. And then the love is even deeper on the other end. There's a woman named Catherine Schultz, who is a writer for The New Yorker. She wrote a beautiful book called Lost and Found. P.S., just drop a footnote, I don't think I've ever read a book with more gorgeous prose than Lost and Found by Catherine Schultz. She's won a Pulitzer. And among the things she talks about in this book is how she met the woman who became her wife, Casey. So Catherine Schultz was in her 30s, single, wondering, will I ever meet my person? And she gets set up with Casey, who lives hundreds of miles away but is passing through town by a mutual friend. They meet, and they instantly realize that each other is their one. And they fall in love, and they get married, and they're deeply connected, and they're raising a child together, and they have all this complexity and difference to process. Let's start with religion, which according to Catherine Schultz is a double difference. Catherine Schultz is Jewish, and Casey is Lutheran, but that's the least of it. Catherine Schultz is, by her own account, an atheist. She doesn't believe in God. She doesn't go to shul. She doesn't go to services. She doesn't pray. She doesn't do religious ritual. She's what she calls a cultural Jew. Casey is a frum Christian. She actually went to seminary for a while to study to become a minister in the Lutheran tradition. She ended up not doing that, but she goes to church every Sunday, never misses, by herself without Catherine, and she often gives the sermons in her church. So there's that difference. Then there's cultural difference. Catherine, her whole worldview shaped by the Holocaust. Her father was one of 11 children. He was the only one who survived the Holocaust. All 10 siblings and the parents and the grandparents and the extended mishpacha all perished in the flames. Only her father survived, so she's spent her adulthood trying to reckon with being a survivor's daughter. And Casey, her partner, has a whole different worldview. It's not about the Holocaust, it's about the Confederacy. She lives on the eastern shore of Maryland, which, according to Catherine Schultz, is very southern. You'll see even now Confederate flags waving. The people on the eastern shore have thick southern accents. And Catherine Schultz notes that when she goes to visit Casey's family on the eastern shore of Maryland, and she looks at the neighbors. Their ancestors owned slaves. And Casey is grappling with that. One grapples with the Shoah, one grapples with the Confederacy. Catherine is a city girl, grows up in a Jewish suburb of Cleveland. Casey grows up on a farm, learns to drive a tractor trailer before she learns to drive a car. So the question, they love each other, but there's all this difference. How do you process the difference? And here's what I took away from this book, which is so beautiful. How you process all this difference, that's the whole thing. How you process all that difference is the very heart of love. So Catherine writes the following. She writes, "We are called on over and over to remember that the person we love does not always have the same thoughts, feelings, frames of reference, reactions, needs, fears, and desires that we do. But overall, the trajectory of a happy relationship, which begins with cherishing similarity, ends in cherishing difference. I am most often moved to gratitude, tenderness, and awe by those parts of Casey that are least like me, because it is in them that I see her most clearly, and because it is thanks to them that my own world has grown so much larger." Complexity, in other words, can deepen love. It is not easy, and it is not automatic, and it takes work. But what I learned in Lakewood at this charedi wedding, seeing charedis and progressives dancing for a bride and groom that they all loved, was that if we can get to the other side of complexity, the love we've strengthened is even deeper and richer, which means that we can now answer that Haitian woman's question this way: honey, we are totally capable of complexity because we are totally capable of love. Shabbat Shalom.